my stay here was difficult primarily because what was new was jogging was new.
Tom Waits was once the king of late-night American music, but at 75, he's become a ghost. Since the 1990s, he's hidden on 40 acres in Sonoma County. His own son stopped speaking to him for 8 months. The drinking, the affairs, the bar fights almost destroyed everything. Now he rarely leaves his fortress except for court battles. His voice, once legendary, is damaged from decades of abuse. The man who sang about broken people became one himself. And the truth about what really broke him is darker than his songs. Tom Waits came into the world on December 7, 1949, weighing 7 pounds and 10 ounces. It was a cold day in Pomona, California. Officially, he was born inside Park Avenue Hospital. But over the years, Tom started telling a much more dramatic version. He said he was born in the back of a yellow cab parked outside Murphy Hospital, and that his parents had to pay $1.85 on the meter. Whether it really happened or not, the story fit perfectly with the man he would become. Even his birth already felt like a song. His parents, Jesse Frank Waits and Alma Fern Johnson, were both school teachers. Jesse was a Spanish teacher from Texas with Scots-Irish roots, and Alma came from Norwegian bloodlines in Oregon. At the time of Tom's birth, they were living on Pickering Avenue in Whittier. Their home was a typical middle-class one, filled with books and regular church routines. But nothing about Tom ever stayed typical for long. In 1959, everything in his life changed. He was just 10 years old when his parents separated, and the wound it left never fully healed. Tom would later call it a trauma. His father, who he remembered as tough and distant and often drunk, left the house. Alma packed up Tom and his 2 sisters and moved to Chula Vista, a quieter suburb near San Diego. Suddenly, Tom was stuck between 2 different worlds. He lived in his mother's disciplined, church-going home, but also visited his unpredictable father, who sometimes took him across the border to Tijuana. That split between order and chaos became the emotional soil where all his future music would grow. That same year, while still just 10, Tom began to change in more shocking ways. He started smoking. He hitchhiked alone. This wasn't just teenage rebellion arriving early. It was a complete rejection of normal childhood. He later described himself as a boy who chased malicious mischief. At school, he was bullied and quiet. But by high school, his voice had already started to carry the gravel that would make him famous, even though back then he was just trying to sound like Ray Charles or Bob Dylan and not quite pulling it off. By the time he was 14 in 1965, he got a job at Napoleone Pizza House in National City. He worked there every week until he turned 19. The owners, Joe Sardo and Sal Crivello, remembered him scribbling lyrics and watching everyone who came in late at night. Tom didn't see it as just a job. It was a place where he could listen. He collected bits of conversation, stories, arguments, jokes, and heartbreaks from the people around him. Some of those lines would end up in songs like Shore Leave and The Ghosts of Saturday Night. He worked late, sometimes until 4 in the morning, then went to school with no sleep. Sal Crivello once said, "I knew he was talented, but I didn't think he'd be that big." But Tom wasn't just big. He was becoming something strange and powerful. During those years, he also spent time with relatives in Gridley and Marysville. One uncle had a raspy, gravel-thick voice that stuck in Tom's memory. He later admitted it influenced how he sang. His musical life started early. At Jordan Elementary School, he learned bugle and guitar. His father taught him to play ukulele. He started a school band called The Systems, where they tried to imitate Motown even though they were just white kids from California. He also listened to Hank Williams and Mexican folk music from his dad's old records. He filled his bedroom walls with Dylan's lyrics and soaked in the sounds of Roy Orbison, Ray Charles, and Wilson Pickett. Those voices, so full of feeling, began to shape his own. At 15, something happened that shook him to the core. He saw Lightnin' Hopkins perform live. The man had gold teeth, a haunted voice, and when he walked backstage, he passed a sign that said, "Keep out. This room is for entertainers only." Tom said he knew right then that he had to be one of them. Another moment came in 1962 when he watched James Brown perform in San Diego. He said it was like putting a finger in a light socket. He compared it to Mass at St. Patrick's Cathedral on Christmas. These weren't concerts. They were awakenings. By 18, Tom dropped out of Hilltop High School in Chula Vista. He wasn't interested in school anymore. He had been living like a grown man for years, working all night, watching strange people, listening to their pain. He called himself a rebel who rebelled even against the other rebels. While everyone around him chased peace signs and flowers, Tom went backwards to the dark streets of the 1950s. He read the beat writers, Kerouac, Ginsberg, Burroughs, and followed their broken poetry instead of the hippie dream. In 1969, when he was 20, he got a job as a doorman at the Heritage Coffee House in San Diego. This tiny job became his doorway into the music world. He started performing there, first covering Dylan and old country trucker ballads like Phantom 309. Then he brought out his own songs, early ones like Old 55 and I Hope That I Don't Fall in Love with You. He was learning his voice in front of strangers, night after night, while also helping run the door. Bigger names started noticing him. He opened shows for Tim Buckley, Sonny Terry, Brownie McGee, and a friend named Jack Tempchin. The Heritage Coffee House became his classroom. Every night was a lesson in timing, silence, and how to reach people through music. In 1971, everything changed. At 21, while still working at the Heritage and playing open mics at the Troubadour in Los Angeles, he was spotted by manager Herb Cohen. Cohen had worked with Frank Zappa, and he signed Tom to Asylum Records in 1972. But what most people don't know is that Tom had already recorded a few tracks for Zappa's Bizarre label the year before. Once signed, Tom moved into the Tropicana Motel in West Hollywood. It was a wreck of a place, known for late-night rock stars and broken dreams. He chose to live there on purpose. He told the LA Times, "You almost have to create situations in order to write about them, so I live in a constant state of self-imposed poverty." That decision to embrace the dirty side of life defined the next few years. In 1973, he released his first album, Closing Time. It barely sold. Critics didn't know what to make of it. He was broke. But then something unexpected saved him. The Eagles heard Old 55 and recorded their own version for their 1974 album, On the Border. Their version became a huge hit. Tom hated it. He called it antiseptic and said they were as exciting as watching paint dry. But the royalties from that one cover gave him the money he needed to survive. Years later, Glenn Frey said, "Tom didn't like our version." And then he got the check. Since then, we're really close. During this time, Tom wasn't pretending to be a struggling artist. He was one. He drank heavily. He smoked constantly. He played shows while completely drunk, with a cigarette stuck to his lip and a cloud of smoke around him. He performed through the fog. At one London gig, he got kicked out of Ronnie Scott's club after just 3 nights because of his behavior. His room at the Tropicana was a mess. Suits from thrift stores, dishes piled high, unshaven for days. He later admitted he went to AA and got clean. But those years nearly destroyed him. In 1974, he released The Heart of Saturday Night. It was more thoughtful, a musical map of American nightlife. Critics paid more attention this time, but sales were still awful. He made so little money he couldn't even afford to keep his trio. He had to tour alone. One reviewer called his songs tawdry affectations. Another said his lyrics were vague and his melodies mournful. Even Tom later said the album was ill-formed and admitted he was just trying. Without the money from the Eagles cover, he might have quit music altogether. But the worst came in 1975. That year, Tom agreed to tour as the opening act for Frank Zappa. What happened on that tour was a nightmare. Every night, Zappa's fans threw trash at him. Vegetables, fruit, even garbage. Zappa had to come on stage just to protect him. At one show, even Tom's own parents joined the chaos and threw lettuce at him. In Ontario, in Passaic, in Manhattan, it was the same story. Jeers, insults, flying food. It was humiliating. But Tom kept going. He drank more to cope. And strangely, the industry respected him for surviving it. That awful tour built his reputation. He was no longer just another struggling songwriter. He was the guy who could handle anything. In the summer of 1976, Tom Waits walked into Wally Heider's Studio 3 in Hollywood and started recording something that would change everything. The sessions ran from July 15 to July 29th, and by the time Small Change came out on September 21st, it became his first real success. The album reached number 89 on the Billboard Top 100, a first for him. It wasn't just the sales that were different, though it did sell more than all his past records combined. It was the way the world finally paused and listened. Produced by Bones Howe, the music featured legendary jazz names like Lou Tobacco on tenor sax, Jim Hughart on bass, and Shelly Manne on drums. This wasn't the quiet folk sound of his early years anymore. This was theatrical. It was full of bruised poetry, pain, and grit. Songs like Tom Traubert's Blues and The Piano Has Been Drinking made it clear he had moved from barroom ballads to something darker. That same year, with the album's success behind him, he formed his first real touring band. They called themselves the Nocturnal Emissions. It had Frank Vicari on tenor saxophone, Fitzgerald Jenkins on bass, and Chip White handling drums and vibraphone. What followed was non-stop travel. He was now a man in motion, and the road would become his second home for the next 3 years. On May 27, 1977, something strange and chaotic happened outside Duke's Tropicana coffee shop in West Hollywood. Tom Waits and his friend Chuck E. Weiss found themselves in a situation they couldn't walk away from. Inside the diner, they had noticed 3 plainclothes sheriff's deputies bothering customers, and when they spoke up, things escalated fast. According to the report, they said things like, "Hey man, I've got these dudes covered," and dared the deputies to fight. Once outside, the officers followed and grabbed them when Weiss made a quick move near his waistband. Guns were pulled. Both Waits and Weiss were handcuffed and charged with fighting in public. Waits later joked that the deputies were dressed in corduroy Sears outfits but were packing heat. His manager, Herb Cohen, added that the deputies claimed they were being arrested for homosexual soliciting and being drunk and disorderly. Patrons from Duke's were so shocked that they complained to the authorities, and an official investigation was launched. But Waits, true to form, just kept going. From late 1976 to the end of 1979, the road became both his battlefield and his burden. He toured constantly, first doing 30 shows for Small Change, then 73 shows for Foreign Affairs, and later 115 more shows for Blue Valentine. These tours took him across America, Japan, Germany, Finland, Belgium, the Netherlands, the UK, and even Australia. But with each show, he was unraveling. He drank heavily. Sometimes he blacked out mid-performance and woke up in hotel rooms he didn't remember checking into. His shows started blending music with unpredictable stage acts. At one point, during a number referencing pasties and a G-string, he brought a stripper on stage. By 1977, he had already toured Japan, opening himself up to an entirely new audience. But the drinking and the endless travel were carving deep lines into his life. He admitted that at first, the lifestyle was thrilling. Then it became routine. Then it became a trap. In 1978, something shifted inside him. He recorded Blue Valentine, an album that felt darker than anything before. It explored stories of broken lives, crime, and loneliness. One track stood out sharply. Christmas Card from a Hooker in Minneapolis wasn't just a song. It was based on real letters fans had written him. In it, a woman writes to an old friend, blending holiday greetings with heartache, court fines, and lies. It was raw. Romeo is Bleeding followed with Latin sounds and echoes of West Side Story. The final track, $29, gave a painful definition to the album's title, a desperate man trying to find forgiveness. Critics called it his first real masterpiece. It was no longer just music. He was documenting the quiet screams of people society had forgotten. Later that same year, he met someone who would change everything. Her name was Kathleen Brennan. They first crossed paths at a New Year's Eve party in 1978, but it wasn't until 1980 that they reconnected. At that time, Brennan was working as a script analyst for Francis Ford Coppola at Zoetrope Studios. She walked into the studio while Waits was recording music for the film One from the Heart. That meeting lit a spark. They didn't waste time. They got married on August 10, 1980. During that same summer, he was finishing his album Heart Attack and Vine, recorded between June 16th and July 15th. He even wrote Jersey Girl for her. But Brennan wasn't just a muse. She became the reason he changed his life. Brennan didn't just see the artist in him, she also saw the damage. Waits had been drinking hard since the beginning, living the image he sold on stage. Brennan pushed him to see the truth. He was killing himself slowly. The man people saw as brilliant and wild was, behind closed doors, falling apart. She helped him get sober, though it took time. He later said he felt like he had become an old man in the worst sense. Bones Howe, his producer, once said that Brennan pulled him away from everyone. But it saved him. Waits hasn't touched alcohol in over 20 years. It was Brennan who helped him climb out of the box he had trapped himself in. In 1983, something remarkable happened. Brennan had started showing him music he'd never heard before. Captain Beefheart, Harry Partch, Tango, Cabaret. Suddenly, Waits didn't sound like the old Tom anymore. That year, he released Swordfish Trombones, a strange and wild album that shocked everyone. Gone were the saxophones. In came the accordion, banjo, bass marimba, squeeze drums, and even a harmonium. He recorded it in August 1982 at Sunset Sound in Hollywood. It was his first time producing an album himself. Critics didn't know what to make of it at first. John Pareles said it sounded like a Salvation Army band lost in a broken-down Hong Kong disco. It didn't chart high, only number 167. But that didn't matter. NME called it the second-best album of the year. Spin later said it was the second greatest album ever made. 9 years later, in 1992, Tom Waits won a $2.6 million lawsuit against Frito-Lay. They had aired a Salsa Rio Doritos commercial with someone pretending to be him, copying his voice so perfectly that even longtime fans were fooled. Waits was furious. He'd always said he'd never sell his voice for ads. The case set a legal precedent, proving that stealing someone's voice for commercials wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. That same year, something even more powerful happened. In 1992, he quit drinking for good. He was 43. He joined Alcoholics Anonymous and told others he was trying to resolve all the pain of his past. He moved to Sonoma County with his family, looking for peace. That same year, he recorded one of his most powerful albums yet, Bone Machine. It wasn't made in a fancy studio, but in a storage room with a cement floor and a water heater. He said it had a good echo, and that was all he needed. He used strange percussion, bones, banging sounds, rhythms that sounded like skeletons dancing. The album was raw. Half the songs were written with Brennan. Keith Richards even joined him for That Feel. It won the Grammy for Best Alternative Album in 1993, and Waits jokingly asked director Jim Jarmusch, "Alternative to what?" By this point, his voice had already started to wear down. All the growling, shouting, and smoking had done damage. In 1987, he even went to see Frank Sinatra's throat doctor in New York. The doctor warned him to stop or risk losing it all. Waits laughed and said, "You mean rich and powerful?" But the truth was, his voice was hurting. He downplayed it publicly, but he couldn't hide the pain forever. That same year, he took a role in the film Ironweed with Jack Nicholson. He played a homeless man, and it didn't feel like acting. Waits had lived that life. He had slept on benches, in doorways, in rooms no one remembers. Playing that role made him face old memories that still hurt. It was real, and the audience could feel it. Through all of this, he never stopped evolving. From 1985 to 1992, he entered a strange experimental phase. He made Rain Dogs in 1985, recording 19 tracks in a basement in Lower Manhattan. Rod Stewart later covered Downtown Train, turning it into a mainstream hit, much to Waits's discomfort. He hated being commercial. He preferred hitting doors with planks to make sound rather than using studio samples. He once told his engineer that he only liked a sound after he had chased it, killed it, skinned it, and cooked it. That album became one of his most praised works. It introduced the idea of rain dogs, creatures that lose their scent in the rain, just like the people in his songs. After 6 long years of silence, Tom Waits came back in 1999 with an album called Mule Variations. It wasn't just any return. The album shot straight to number 30 on the Billboard 200 in the US. But the real surprise came from Europe. In Norway, it reached number 1, and it ended up charting in 14 different countries around the world. People everywhere were suddenly paying attention to a man who had always seemed like an outsider. Critics praised it. Fans couldn't stop listening. The album earned him a Grammy for Best Contemporary Folk Album, and the song Hold On got nominated for Best Male Rock Vocal Performance. More than 500,000 copies were sold, and in 2010, it went platinum in Europe. What made it even more powerful was that for the first time since 1987, Tom went on tour again. That tour stretched across Europe and North America through the summer and fall of 1999. This was the moment his status shifted. He wasn't just a cult favorite anymore. He was becoming something much bigger, and he did it without selling out. In 2000, something strange happened at a restaurant involving a fan, but no one really knows the full story. What is clear is that during this time, Tom was more determined than ever to protect his identity. A decade earlier, in 1990, he had taken on Frito-Lay and won. They had aired a Doritos radio ad using someone who imitated his voice. It played on over 250 stations. Tom, who had always refused to do commercials, was furious. He called it the corn chip sermon. The jury agreed with him. They awarded $500,000 in damages against Frito-Lay and $1 million more against the ad agency. That case changed everything for artists. It was the first time a singer won punitive damages just for having their voice stolen. Tom's refusal to be exploited became legendary. Even without the usual fame machine behind him, he proved that his voice was sacred, and the law had to respect that. Then came Real Gone in 2004, a strange and raw album unlike anything he had done before. For the first time in his career, there was no piano. Instead, Tom began experimenting with beatboxing and rough-edged sounds, some of which came from his son Casey. The songs mixed funk, Latin, African, and even Jamaican rock-steady rhythms. It wasn't just music, it was a wild experiment. One track, Day After Tomorrow, stood out for another reason. It quietly criticized the Iraq War, using metaphor and emotion rather than anger. That song became a kind of protest, even if it never raised its voice. The whole album was bold enough to be named the best of 2004 by Harp magazine. On tracks like Don't Go Into That Barn, Tom wove in history from a New York Times article about a Kentucky slave jail using real quotes passed down through generations. It wasn't just music, it was storytelling with scars. 4 years later, in 2008, he hit the road again for the Glitter and Doom Tour. This was his first major tour since 1999, and it was anything but ordinary. Over 30 shows stretched across North America and Europe, and the ticket rules were strict. Only 2 tickets per person. You needed a photo ID that matched the name on the ticket. If not, you couldn't get in. No refunds, no scalpers. His sons joined him on stage, Casey on drums, and Sullivan on clarinet and conga. Alongside them were seasoned musicians like Vincent Henry, Omar Torres, Patrick Warren, and Seth Ford Young. Every detail was documented for a live album released in 2009. They played major venues like Fox Theatre in Atlanta, Phoenix Park in Dublin, and Le Grand Rex in Paris. But behind the scenes, it took a toll. Tom was 58, and night after night of performing began to wear him down. In October 2011, at age 61, Tom Waits surprised everyone again with Bad As Me. This album had something rare, a full force of guest legends. Keith Richards played guitar. Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers handled bass. Augie Myers brought his legendary keyboards. His son Casey returned on drums. Waits's longtime friends Mark Ribot and David Hidalgo also came back. When the album dropped, it soared to number 6 on the Billboard 200. This was his first top 10 album ever in the United States. It even earned a Grammy nomination for Best Alternative Music Album. The critics were stunned. One said Tom was an American marvel, smart and primal, raucous and meticulous, bleak and comical all at once. The New York Times noted how indie rock musicians studied the path he had carved for himself. This album also marked his return to Warner Music after more than 3 decades away. But the road had been hard. Back in 1983, when his daughter Kelesimone was born, Tom was deep into chaos. He was promoting swordfish trombones, living on the road like a wandering artist. He often vanished for weeks while Kathleen Brennan stayed home, raising their baby alone. The strain nearly ended their marriage. Brennan gave him multiple ultimatums, most of which he ignored. Their home in Sonoma County became a place of cold silences and missed moments. Tom later admitted that he had been lost in his own tortured image, more focused on being a mad genius than a father. By 1985, Brennan had threatened divorce more than once. Then things got worse. By the late 1980s, his drinking had spiraled out of control. There were bar fights, affairs, lies. Brennan finally had enough in 1990. She found proof of the affairs and handed him divorce papers along with a choice: get sober, go to therapy, join Alcoholics Anonymous. or lose everything. Tom called that moment the abyss. He chose to climb out. Within weeks, he was in AA. He started weekly family therapy in Sonoma. He slipped up twice in 1991, but never again. His sobriety saved not just his marriage, but his life. People around him saw the change. He was no longer the ghost in his own story. His son Casey, born in 1985, followed him into music but carried a heavy weight. By 21, Casey was a skilled drummer. He played on Bad As Me, earning Grammy-level recognition. But during the 2006 tour, Casey broke. Living under his father's enormous shadow crushed him. Audiences expected him to be a younger version of Tom, and it triggered severe anxiety. In 2007, he stopped talking to his father for 8 months. Insiders said Casey felt torn between honoring his father's legacy and carving out his own identity. The healing only began when Tom publicly recognized Casey's talent and gave him space. Since then, Casey has worked with indie bands and even uses stage names to avoid being linked too closely to his father. The youngest, Sullivan, born in 1993, took a different path. He became a music producer. He studied at Berklee College of Music and later joined Epitaph Records in Los Angeles. He didn't want the spotlight. He preferred working behind the scenes, creating sounds, not fame. The family's life in Sonoma County is heavily guarded. They live on 40 acres with private security and no trespassing signs. Sullivan even changes his phone number every few months and uses aliases in business to stay hidden. He has never spoken publicly about his father. Since the early 1990s, Tom Waits has become nearly invisible by design. After moving to Sonoma County, he started turning down interviews. Since 1999, he's granted fewer than a dozen total. He still fights lawsuits when his image or voice is used without permission. His 40-acre home, bought for about $750,000 in 1992, includes a private studio called Prairie Sun. He screens his calls through layers of answering machines. He rarely leaves except for court appearances. This deep isolation has only added to his mystery. Some fans still camp outside his home, hoping to catch a glimpse of the man they've only known through sound. In 2022, he re-emerged again with something unexpected. A cover of Bella Ciao, the Italian anti-fascist anthem. He slowed it down to a mournful pace, released a video filled with anti-Trump protest footage, and gave all the money to the Indivisible Project. It was his first new song in 2 years. Around the same time, his agent Paul Charles revealed in his autobiography that Tom had started writing again. He had even recorded new songs but got pulled back into the world of movies. Still, everyone is hoping. The last full album was in 2011, and the wait has been long. When he turned 75 on December 7, 2024, fans couldn't believe how sharp he still was. Tributes poured in, calling him timeless. His voice, that gravelly roar once described as Louis Armstrong meeting Ethel Merman in hell, hasn't changed. A satirical article joked that if he ever cleared his throat, he'd reveal a beautiful falsetto. His recent acting role in Paul Thomas Anderson's Licorice Pizza in 2021 proved he still had screen presence. He played Rex Blau, larger than life, and the film earned 3 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture.